Hi, my name's Khaki and this week we're finishing off our brick walls. We're weathering them. Now I love weathering, and because these are going to have water and other things on, I've chosen just to do it with acrylic paint. There are many vast ways of doing it, including loads of powders and pastels. Because I'm going to be putting water products right up to these, and I didn't want it to bleed into the water at all in any kind of way colouring it, I've chosen to only use acrylic paint that's very solid and safe when it's dry. So we need to take our basically painted, just coloured walls and make them look really special. And all of these walls are next to water, and you can see them here in their final positions. The first time we cut ourselves some basic foam walls. The next time we painted them, so they're either blue brick or they're red brick. It's now time to put the weathering on, because these look very shiny, very new, and we need to make sure they look nice and weathered. These are all waterside walls or pathside walls, and as a result there's a lot of weathering on them. So the first most important thing is to get some photos. Now I've got these photos just off the internet, and you can see my port ones, some of them are quite bright, some of these are a bit blocky, but they get the colours, but there's a lot of streaking. When you look at my blue brick, it's really green along a lot of this. Some lovely weathering on this one, some plants and everything, and yeah, really beautiful. So loads of weathering to put on there, and that's what we're going to do this week. So the first thing I'm going to do is add some white incrustations. If you look at any of the photos, you can see there's a lot of white coming out the walls, and this is where the water is seeped out from the ground and deposited calcium carbonate or some other kind of limestone that's a mineral that's been carried in the water and it's deposited. So you'll find it a lot. So for that I'm just going to use white and a very thin, actually it's not that thin, white and a brush. And almost all of my walls have this somewhere. It's a really common effect and very easy to do. So all I'm going to do is take this, find the right wall, this one for example, and just make sure this is mostly off. It's not that thick. And just drag a little bit down. And if you find your white isn't quite thick enough, you might have to build it up in layers. Now we need to put the brown, dusty water above the water line, and this is where the water's come up and gone down, and that's really noticeable in the blocks that are emptied and filled a lot, that the top layers are practically just brown. So I'm just going to apply some wooden deck tan. I know it's going to be a bit strong, so I'm going to tip it out and thin it. Now I'm not going to thin it with isopropyl alcohol, because you saw in the last video that does have the habit of taking off the layer underneath, and normally I do a lot of this with enamels, and if you change your solvent layer between acrylic and enamel, they don't take the layer underneath off. I'm going to dilute it about half, so about an equal amount of water on there, just to make sure that it's nice and thin. And I'm going to add a few drops of flow improver. This is Artist Acrylic Flow Improver by Winsor & Newton. There's many other different makes, and it just helps everything to sort of flow better. The problem with acrylics over enamels is they don't flow, they won't go in mortar lines, they won't spread easily, which makes it harder to produce really good weathering effects with them. But it's not impossible. On this one, which is the lock, the entire lot is covered in water regularly, and if you look at it, then the top brick has dried, the bottom bricks are wet. So I'm going to do one brick with this and a little bit above, and then everything beneath that is going to be a different colour. And I'm just going to put it on here and it will dry. I'm going to feather the top a bit so it's not too harsh. You can run your finger along if you're not happy with it down, actually, if you feel you've put too much on. And no harsh lines, just some nice grey, and it's really that row of bricks there that I want to get, and it's the surface of them, the mortar as well will get covered, and we're just going to make them look like they've got a layer of brown gunk on them. Now, as always, some of these have got mud and stuff coming out the walls, so you can start to add those streaks in, and because this is thin, it's going to dry much less opaque than it looks when you put it on. So don't worry if it looks a bit garish when you put it on. Unlike the white, which does remain quite garish, this will dry off quite a bit. And then on these, what I'm looking for is some weathering. And I'm going to use this as the weathering. And it's really simple to do, not too much on your brush. You just need to drag down and just keep dragging down so that you have a nice, starting it on this stonework. My problem is this stonework actually wraps around, so I don't want to go all the way up. And just keep putting it down till you've got some, just a little bit of highlighting, bring out something so the brick wall looks just like it's been streaked and weathered. And it will dry far more subtle. So the next thing we need to do is add the green colours, because there's a lot of green in these walls. So for that I'm going to use olive drab and khaki, two Tamiya colours. And I'm going to use these straight. I'm not going to thin these, I'm going to use these straight out the tin because I need them to be quite thick. So first of all I'm just going to put some lighter colours on with the olive drab. But this colour's almost just a little bit too light. So I can just use it to add some depth to some of these other areas. But in of itself it's not quite the right colour for the green. It's just a bit too pale. Now I'm going to move on to the olive drab, again just straight out of the well shaken pot, and again a lovely colour for adding some of these darker greens at the bottom of a sort of water area. Now, one good thing about using consistent colours is that when I come to paint my lock gates later on, I will be able to use the same colours and know that they're the right colours. So it's always useful when you're doing large dioramas to try and pick a set of colours and almost stick to them. So the final thing I need to do on my locks is just put a bit of mud back in the walls. It's all very green, and if you look, they're actually quite splodgy with bits of algae coming off, and the sort of brick behind is more of a muddy colour. So I'm going to take the JGSDF brown that I've used in previous sort of areas and just put a little bit on with some natural sponge, and I can just take it, dash it a little bit, and it's on these ones here, and I can just splodge it on. Now I don't want it to be too much, but I don't want it to be too little. That's actually quite a lot there. So there we go. It's just a dry brushing. And it will add just a bit more colour back into here. It's all looking a bit boring, a bit flat. And I also need to do something with these two walls, which actually have a bit of black coming down as well. So what I'm going to do is just get my black grey. I never actually use black itself. And this is black grey by Vallejo, one of my favourite colours. So I'm just going to use Tamiya clear varnish. It's quite thick, so it will stay where I put it, and it just has a lovely sort of texture to it, so I can put it on and I'll get a nice section that looks nice and glossy. So that's it. Loads and loads of different layers and techniques that can really bring your walls to life, just adding extra texture through paint. Now, if you're not using walls that are going to have water against them, you could go to town with powders, chalks, pastels, whatever you like as well, to really add some extra texture in there. I'll leave it up to you to experiment. Well, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it and found these useful. Let me know if you've experimented with doing anything similar and how it went for you, and what you think of all the various different techniques and what works for you. There's loads of space in the comments below. But otherwise, subscribe to me, support me on Patreon, go check out my website, all of the usual things, and I'll see you next time.